everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, how to present a painless 90-day performance evaluation. My name is Kim Bussey. I am the Key Relationship Manager, and today Wendy Schaefer and I, who is our SVP of Operations, is going to tag team this webinar. Between the two of us, we have over 40 years of experience giving and receiving performance evaluations. Yes, we started when we were mere babies, right, Wendy?
I wish that were true.
So before we begin, we are just a couple of quick housekeeping things. At the top of your screen, there is an icon of a person with a hand raised. So go ahead, if you can hear us, raise your hand. You can also at this point, if any time during the webinar you agree, disagree with us, you need to speak a little louder or speak a little softer, you want us to speed up or slow down, you can let us know by clicking any of those icons, as well as give us laughter and applause. That's always appreciated. In our chat box down below, if you have any questions or comments as we move forward, please make sure that you're asking them. We'll try to answer those questions as we go along, as well as have a Q&A session. And of course, as always, this webinar is being recorded. So if you don't follow us on our social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, make sure that you do that, and this presentation will be up in about a week on our YouTube channel. So, Wendy, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. I am ready.
All right. So as I said, between the two of us, we have over 40 years of experience, and we've experienced almost anything that can be said or done during a performance evaluation, and we are here today to talk to you about that. And we're also going to give you some information and some different perspectives, both from the supervisor perspective and from the employee. So many times think about that as a supervisor who's trying to conduct a 90-day evaluation. Some of the thoughts that may be going through our mind is, oh, it takes too much time, and why should I bother? They already know this. I've been meeting with them regularly and consistently. Why do I have to do a 90-day evaluation? And then there's also some fears that go along with that as well. Well, what if they quit if they don't like the feedback? I've spent time and money and training and recruiting, and now I'm going to give them some feedback that they may not appreciate. So what happens if they quit? And honestly, 90 days, isn't that just too early to tell them what they're doing wrong? Because I don't want to demotivate them. The other thing, so we've talked about frustrations, we've talked about, some fears. The other thing that ties along in with those fears is, what can I say legally in a performance evaluation? And all of this is looking at from the supervisor perspective. So there's some fears and some trepidations going into an evaluation process, especially in a 90-day evaluation. But there's also some fears from employees.
Yes. So from the employee perspective, it's the same types of fears, just a different angle. So while the supervisor's wondering if the review is really worth their time at this point in the process, and we don't want to talk about things that are going wrong, the employee's looking at it as like, when am I going to get my evaluation? This is probably a process that they've heard about when they were hired. So they start to have some nerves getting close to that 90 days about what's going to be said. Also, what am I supposed to bring to this meeting? How do I prepare for it? What type of feedback should I be providing? And of course, for different positions, different types of employees are going to be nervous about how prepared they should be for this. They want to know that they're doing well, or what they need to improve on in an official capacity. So the 90-day review is perfect for that. Also, they might feel like they're doing a good job, but are concerned that that's their perception and not the employer's perception. So what can they fix? And of course, what is my supervisor going to say about me? Are they liking me so far? What have I done wrong? What can I correct? So all of these worries and nerves are occurring in your employee in a very sensitive time, the first 90 days, when everybody is feeling what could go wrong? Am I going to be employed here after the 90-day probationary period? But also we want to look at this from the angle of not just about what they're doing wrong, but also about what they're doing right, and looking at it as this opportunity to discuss everything. So I think that all of the concerns that an employee has is exactly the reason why we should do a 90-day evaluation and be excited to talk to them about how they're doing.
Absolutely. So our first point when we talk about that delivering a painless 90-day performance evaluation is keep calm and just evaluate the performance. It doesn't have to be scary for either the manager or the employee. The benefits of the evaluation when it's done correctly far outweigh those challenges and the frustration of do I have enough time? What's going to happen with it? So as I said, we're going to give you some insight from both the supervisor and the employee perspective today to help you take that stress away from you and set you up for success. And if I didn't mention it before, this is going to be interactive. So go ahead, tell us what you think the purpose of a 90-day evaluation is. Is it everyone is on the same page? Is it to make sure that you're identifying gaps in training or hear from the employee? Maybe it's to set next steps or all of the above. Go ahead, select what you think it is if you think it's all of the above. And overwhelmingly, we see that it is all of the above, and you're absolutely correct. So we've got to make sure that we're using this 90-day evaluation in a way that really truly begins to set the employee up for success, because there is a definite difference between 90 days versus an annual evaluation.
Yes, absolutely. So to me, the 90-day evaluation is a checkpoint to ensure how to really track how the employee is doing towards job mastery. So your 90 days, we're learning, we're training, trying to figure out the culture, the workplace, the people, and the job duties. So it's a lot going on, and the 90 days is really that pulse of how they're tracking towards the job mastery and getting out of training. Also, this is a perfect opportunity to set up a development plan for the rest of the year because you are going to have an annual review after the 1 year period and of course beyond. So after the 90 days, you can set up that development plan so they can track towards an annual review. Also, you're going to be setting those expectations for that next evaluation period. Also, the difference between the 90 days and the annual is that it involves multiple people because the first 90 days, you've often got trainers, mentors, mentors. And so you want to also get feedback from other departments if you're doing any cross training or like a brief rotation between departments. You can get feedback from that as well. I know when I started here, we spent about, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour in every department, even if it's something that we weren't going to touch in our roles. So it gave us an opportunity to get a picture of how everything worked. And so when these employees are meeting the new hire, you can get feedback from them as well. And the feedback is so important because you're going to use that within your your 90-day evaluation. You'll take that feedback so you can give it to your employees. So that's the difference between the 90-day, I think, and Kim's going to go over the annual.
Yeah, absolutely, Wendy. And I love that, when you started with Omnia, that you spent 30 minutes in every department. So it's that good feeling of making sure, one, that we're introducing our new employees during the onboarding process, which is a completely different webinar, but also helping them understand how each department works together for the success of the company. And so when we look at it from the annual evaluation, if the 90 days is all about a checkpoint to make sure that they're on the right path, the annual evaluation recaps those successes and the challenges during the past year. It gives you that opportunity instead of looking forward, which is what the 90 days does mostly. The annual evaluation is looking at past performance and then a little bit on that forward view. So we're able to talk about the successes and the challenges. Once they understand what the role is, have they really mastered that task? The annual evaluation focuses a little bit more on career pathing. So you're still going to have some professional development in that current role, but what it allows you to do is to start having those conversations of, yes, I know that you're in sales and you want to move up into sales management. Here's your strengths that you have and those responsibilities that you have mastered. Sorry, can't talk this moment. You've mastered, And here are the additional tasks or responsibilities that you need to know to grow into that position, or to have that conversation. Maybe someone comes in and they're working as service, but customer service, but there's an opportunity to go into inside sales or into a sales role, or to work as an account manager, which is moving still on the service side, but a little bit more active and hands-on. The annual evaluation allows you to have that two-way conversation with the employee to find out which career path they are, to begin to create that professional development for the upcoming year. And it typically only involves the supervisor and the employee, because when you come to that annual evaluation, the supervisor may check in with someone who is working with the dotted line that works closely with them. For instance, I work very closely with our marketing department. So my supervisor may ask Carrie, hey, how is Kim with meeting deadlines for getting presentations in? Just to use that information on the evaluation, but it's not as heavy a weight as it is on that 90-day review. So when we talk to you about, what the purpose of the 90-day is and when to do it, but why 90 days? Like, really, Wendy, why do we look at it at 90 days instead of 30 or 40?
So I think we're mainly using 90 days because that's the standard probationary period that everybody's familiar with. But the most important thing is that it's early on in the process. It's early on in the employee's tenure. So it doesn't have to be 90 days for your company or for a particular job within your company. It can all depend on the level of training that's needed in that particular job. Some will be shorter and longer, the length of training, the ramp up time to get up to speed in the position. So you might find for some roles that you're going to do a 60-day review or even a 30-day review. But a lot of it is that whole 90-day probationary period. So if that works and is consistent, then you want to do it that way. It's great, but you can change it up. But again, it's just because it's early in the process. So the employee understands how they're tracking towards, again, mastering the job. So we're going to monitor that process, and we can determine additional training needs that the employee might need to get up to speed. Also, it's really important, I think, we're going to take the employee's temperature on morale, workload, and cultural fit. How is everything working? Because it's such a, again, it can be such a sensitive time in those first 90 days for it. There's a lot of nerves and insecurities, if you will, that the employee is facing. So we can ask them about how their, what their morale is like, what their workload is like, how they're feeling fitting in with other employees on the team. And all of these are important, not only for the employee, but for the company and for you as a direct supervisor, so you can make sure that they're happy and tracking well. If you know how they feel about everything, then you can solve little problems early. And sometimes what is a little problem to you might feel huge to them. So that first 90 days, you can show them that you're listening and solving problems that they might be facing. So we want that process to really create a player. So if they realize that we're listening to what their insecurities are, what their problems are, and fixing those, that's what's going to build a lot of loyalty also for the retention of that employee. And then we'll want to know also about the training process. What went well? What can we do differently or better the next time around? Every new hire really gives us the opportunity to improve our own processes and get better every time. I know as the trainer for Omnia, I'm always changing something up with every training class based on what the last new hires told me. So it's a perfect opportunity to just continue to get better. And then also, with that 90 days, it gives them an opportunity to make mistakes and not feel basically not feel bad about that. They'll understand that it is a learning process and they'll be comfortable asking you questions. So we want to really remove that negative connotation from the 90 days and make sure that they understand this is a way to make them better. And Kim's going to talk to us, of course, about that whole learning cycle for an employee, so we know really what they're feeling within that first 90 days.
Absolutely. And we have to look at these 90 days into, when we look at this, there are four stages of learning. So I always like to say the first stage is that unconscious incompetence, that I don't know what I don't know. I'm happy to have a job. And keep in mind that this 90-day evaluation isn't just for new hires for the company. It should be conducted for anyone that's in a new position because everyone goes through these four stages, whether they're brand new to the company or they're new to the position. So by one, understanding that during the first 30 days, we really truly don't know what we don't know. Towards the end of it, we may go, okay, I've gone through training, but most of the time training focuses on the technical aspect. It doesn't focus on what you really experience in the day-to-day ins and outs of customer service or working with clients or understanding the products. The second stage of learning is what I call the conscious incompetence, where I know what I don't know. And a lot of times your employees are struggling with this. They're comparing themselves to other people who should be um, further along than they are, and they want to be at that same level. Also, as managers, if we are naturally very quick paced and assertive, we may be expecting our new employees or the new employee in that role to pick it up very, very quickly. And at this stage, they're struggling. So they're going to need your insight to give them coaching to encourage them. And then the third stage is that conscious competence. And we usually hit that by about stage, 90 days into employment. I know what I know. I'm not having to refer back to my notes as much. I'm able to take on some tasks. I'm not having to go back to my supervisors or my peer mentors to be able to do that. And that's why it's critical at when we conduct this evaluation at the 90 days to make sure that we're not expecting employees to be at that fourth stage, which is that unconscious competence stage, which is the I don't know what I don't know. Typically, each stage lasts about 30 days. So about 4 months into the job, you should expect your team to be able to understand what's going on and to just do their job. Unless it's something that is very, very technical that may have a longer ramp up period. So the 90 days is that good checkpoint to be able to say, I've got some times to be able to give you some very critical feedback on what you've done well, what are some areas of opportunity, while still as a manager, I don't expect you to be perfect. So we need to make sure that we're understanding that stage. So as we begin to conduct and write this 90-day evaluation, make sure that your goals are realistic. You've got to be able to say, yes, I know I move super fast, but they may not. Do they truly have it? And the only way to be able to do that is you need to get feedback, not only from yourself, but also from the employees through the self-appraisal and trainers and peers. So when you're looking at this as the supervisor, you need to, one, make sure that you're making some notes by using coaching. We offer the coaching companion, but using forms so that as it's an informal observation that you're making notes. Our brain typically only remembers 30 days of information in our short-term memory. And if you're like me, I can't even remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday. So it's even worse. So you have to make notes, whether it's on a formal coaching guide, whether it's email information, but make notes so that you can remember what has happened with that employee over the past 90 days. We know no one's going to be perfect on day 90. So many times it takes 6, 9, 12 months to get perfect. But however, were there issues in the first 45 days? Where even though we know no one's going to be perfect, that there was a mistake that was made or an issue that needs to be addressed. Attendance, if you're in the banking, a teller outage, things of that nature. So as a supervisor, you need to make sure that you're coaching consistently throughout those 90 days. You're taking notes and you're writing it down. The other thing that you need to do is to be checking in with those employees, those trainers, and peer mentors. The employee, you're going to check in as you're giving them the coaching. But then you also have to ask them to complete that self-appraisal. That's where they have the opportunity to talk about what they're struggling with, what they think their strengths are, as well as brag on themselves. So they may be doing something that you have no idea that they're doing now. And so you want to make sure that you're gathering that information. Also, when we look at this as a supervisor, as you gather this information from the trainers and the peers and yourself, we want to make sure that this is a positive experience. However, we all know that from time to time there may be a bad hire. No matter how diligent you've interviewed them, you've used our behavioral assessment to find out, do they match those behavioral traits to be successful? You've had 4 people interview them. Sometimes there's someone who struggles. They may not be a good cultural fit. Somehow they snuck past the entire interview process. And by having these coaching companions and having this feedback, whether it's online with peer evaluations, whether it's the notes that you've taken, it also begins to build that trail of documentation in case, and knock on wood, that doesn't happen, that the employee isn't working out. Now you have written documentation in place that you can move forward if necessary for further disciplinary action or termination. And that's the dark side of the evaluations, but we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't talk to you about it. So I've talked to you about supervisors and employees. Wendy, as the trainer, what's some of the feedback that you give supervisors?
Absolutely. And I wanted to just make a point too about the supervisors giving feedback. And I had meant to say this a couple slides ago, but we definitely don't want to wait until the 90 days to give that feedback. We want it to be continuous because the purpose of the 90-day evaluation is going to be that formal culmination of the conversations that you've had with the employee over the past 90 days so that nobody's surprised. Same with the trainers and the peer mentors. As a trainer, depending on the position within the first 90 days, the trainer is definitely spending by far the most amount of time with your new hire. So they're really going to have a lot of insight and be able to give you the most concrete feedback that you can use in the formal evaluation meeting as well. So you want to understand how they're mastering their tasks and concepts as well as their attitude. I know that a lot of times, Kim was talking about you make that hire, they get through the interview process, and then the next thing you know, they're kind of surprising you with their behavior. So the trainer is going to see both those angles. They're going to see how they're mastering the tasks and how they are attitude-wise. I know there's nothing more frustrating for me as a trainer when I've got somebody who is picking up the material so well, but they're acting very weird or odd or doing things that you just know it's not going to work with your clientele or with other employees, especially whatever position they're in, if it's a lot of face-to-face or phone contact, or vice versa, they're not doing well with the material, but they're great with people. So obviously we want to find somebody who does well with both. And the trainer is going to be able to give you that insight, and hopefully it's something that's coachable and you can work on them with throughout the 90 days and beyond. Same with the peer mentor. So we want to ask questions throughout that mentoring process, but also matching people up with the peer mentors. The trainer is going to give you a lot of insight into that employee's personality, the pace they work at, and then we can talk about, and we'll get through this a little bit later in the presentation, but how to match them up with a peer mentor that will work best with them. Kim, turning it over for the supervisor's role.
Yeah, so we talked about who should do it. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty and tell you how you should do it. So when you are working with that employee, once again, whether it's a brand new employee to the company or a new employee into the position, it's critical during that first 30 days of hire, after they get through the training, that you give the employee a copy of that evaluation form. It's not fair for us to say we're going to evaluate you when we haven't set the expectations and told them the responsibilities that we have for them. And if you know that there's something on the evaluation form that they may not necessarily be trained on or working on during the last within that 90 days, let them know that so that you've set that expectations. I know like for us with Omnia, Wendy does the training and we'll tag team some of it, but it's at least 2 weeks. It's a 2 week very intensive classroom training. And then it's 2 weeks in offices listening to calls, depending on the position. So they will go through and sit with everyone. If it's on service, they will sit with people on the sales team and the service team and vice versa, so that they can truly see and listen to real life conversations as well as be listened to. So once they get to a point where we're comfortable, we're letting them go, we're letting them talk on the phone, but there's someone in the office listening to them, serving as that lifeline to be able to say, okay, here's a client question that you don't know, here's the answer, and to offer that real-time feedback. So, but there are certain things on our service team, for example, that they may not work on immediately. One of the criteria is that we're asking them to implement trainings for clients. Well, during the first 90 days, it's unrealistic of me to expect a brand new person to do that. So my expectation as I'm going over a copy of that evaluation form is to say, on this particular one, we're not going to, I don't expect you within the first 90 days to be at this level. Here's what we're going to talk about with that. And giving them that insight. So they're not stressing out about, oh my gosh, I haven't done this and how do I do it? The other thing is you want to send the self-evaluation to the employees, and the self-evaluation should be the same evaluation form that you use. And you want to send it to them 1 or 2 weeks in advance. The purpose of that is you want to get their feedback. Remember, it's critical to get feedback from both people. Once you receive it, then first, when you send it to them, you want to make sure that you're telling them, I want your strengths, I want your opportunities. This is your chance to brag on yourself. Give me that insight. You got a customer client email that was amazing. And then once you send it to them, you set that deadline, they send it back to you, read the self-appraisal. And I think this is the step that's missed most often when trying to create that evaluation and make it as painless as possible. Whether you read the self-appraisal before you write your evaluation or after you write it, before you meet with the employee, it's critical to read it. It's going to give you some insight. Maybe you see those points where you're both right on track and in sync, but then there may be something that you're seeing as a challenge that they're seeing as, hey, I've mastered this, I'm good to go, woohoo. So one, if you read it, you can be able to pinpoint. Then you can be able to begin to talk about, okay, I'm going to need to spend more time on this point. I'm going to have to give them examples and facts about it. It's because I know that we have a difference of opinion here. And then as you're doing that, you want to begin to discuss those next steps, create action plans, development plans, and goals for the remaining year, and also be ready to listen to feedback with an open mind. And I think this is critical when you're actually writing and giving that evaluation. We have to keep an open mind. They may say, I didn't like this on the training department. In fact, let's talk about this for a minute. How many of you have a formal training program? Yes, no, or depends on the position. Go ahead and complete our poll in the upper left-hand box. Okay, great. So we're seeing almost a 50 yes, no. It depends on the position is what's coming on top. Well, what positions do you have a formal training program for? On the lower right-hand box, type in what you have a formal training program for. Analyst. So what else do we have for? Sales. Great. So we have sales, we have an analyst, but most of the customer service. But sometimes what we're seeing is that we have a formal training program for those that are client facing. So I'm seeing that. Sales, account manager, customer service are a highly technical role, but what we don't have is a formal training program for those positions that may be more support, receptionist, those are those positions that we really need to listen to that feedback with an open mind and make sure that when we're giving them information that maybe we create a checklist to help create that training program so that once again we've set that expectations in the very beginning. And I know a lot of times as leaders, depending on your natural behavioral traits, some of us are very big picture. We're just, let's just go for it. And we don't give enough information, or we're just like, oh, you're doing great. But to an employee who's brand new, they may need more than, oh, you're just doing great. They need that hard facts. Tell me what I've done great in. Or, maybe we don't like to give up control. And so even though they're reaching their goals, they're not doing it the way that we want them to do it because it's not our way. We have to take into account who we are, our behavioral instincts, and those traits, and take them out of writing the evaluation. So if we know we're naturally big picture, that's where it's critical to have that feedback from everyone and taking those notes so that you can give those examples and feedback. And then when we're writing those evaluations, once again, from the employee perspective, they have some tasks to make this a painless evaluation as well.
They do. So it's about half the amount of tasks that the supervisor has, but they're new and nervous, so that's going to be okay. The big thing is that you want to encourage them to be open and honest, because if they're not sharing with you what they feel they're doing right and wrong, then you're not going to be able to help and develop them. And this is all about wanting to retain A players, build A players. So we need them to be open and honest with the struggles that they're facing, and you'll create that environment for them. So if they think they're failing in the role, one of the things that we can do is have them be very specific with us in why they feel that way. And if you don't see it as a challenge, you want to make sure not to brush it off and go, oh, no, 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 don't worry about that. It's fine. You're tracking well. A lot of employees, especially in roles that have a high attention to detail, and you've got an employee who is very structured, they're really going to want to hear from you why you feel they're tracking well, why you don't see it the same way. So giving them details. And again, I guess we're going back to what the supervisor is doing, but they're going to be able to give us examples and facts, and we're going to do that back. So you want to encourage them to do that, and then also make sure that they're completing their self-appraisal within the designated time frame. And like Kim said, that's 1 to 2 weeks that they're going to get to do that. And that might seem like a lot, but for some people, and Kim was touching on the behavioral types, for some employees, it's the same thing. There are employees who are very analytical. They're going to overthink everything, and they're very detail oriented. So the more time you give them to think this over, the better that prepared they're going to be with their examples and facts. And with that, you want to make sure that if they tell you something's going wrong, that something's not good, that they're specific about it. So if they come and say, the training is just not helping me, that's not going to help you as a supervisor fix it. So you want to ask them questions like, what's not going well? What do you feel is missing? What else can we give you to bring you up to speed? So if they're kind of struggling to articulate, you can help them through that process. And of course, so they need to be ready to listen and create next steps. And as a supervisor, you'll encourage them to do that. So they're going to be open to your suggestions for improvement and seeing that you're willing to help solve their problem and move further along in the process. Also, when we do this with the employee's role, it's really important to kind of figure out who they are and what motivates them. So some of your employees you'll see are very social. They're going to need to have a personal connection with you first before they can open up. Whereas others are, like we said, very analytical. They really prefer to get straight down to business, and they can feel very uncomfortable if you as a supervisor are sort of trying to start things off in more of an icebreakery way. So that's a new word, breakery. So just making sure that you're understanding what it is that they need based on their personality type will help you also move that process along more smoothly and encourage the employee to fulfill their role better. So Moving on to the trainers and peer mentors, which this is what I do in Omnia, is training our new hires. So the first thing that we want to do in order to make the first 90 days successful and the evaluation successful is to set our trainers up for success. So just as you, the supervisor, would like to know what makes your employee tick, it will really help the trainers to know this as well. So coming in, I know I'm going to do things differently when I'm training salespeople versus training our analyst positions, because the salespeople tend to be very fast paced and big picture oriented. So I tailor the training to hit on those needs, whereas the analysts are very detailed. They like to consider everything. They're thinking the whole process through. So I do that training in a much more methodical fashion. So if you can give your trainers some insight into the type of person they're going to be training, it will allow them to set that training process up. And I know this is about the review, but the training process is where you're going to get most of your feedback for that 90-day review period. So sharing any behavioral assessments that you might do with the trainer ahead of time. I know here at Omni, of course, we do behavioral assessments for a living, but we have our profiles outside of our doors. So when somebody's coming in, they know what our style is, how we communicate, and then it also helps them walk in the door with some self-awareness of who they are. It gets you thinking like, okay, I tend to be very methodical and detailed as a communicator, but because I'm training salespeople, I really need to dial that back and hit the highlights, move quickly, and then go back and get the details in a different way. So that's where we're kind of helping set the trainers up for success. And then also, you're going to check in with them, like we said, very frequently, feedback throughout the process. And you might need to ask specific questions on how the employee is doing, not only with the mastery of the information, but also with their attitude, with their how receptive they are to your feedback as a trainer. Are they getting argumentative when they're not catching on to something? Are they staying open and being receptive to learning the information in a different way? So you're going to check in with them frequently. I know when Kim and I do the trainings here for the sales team, we will typically talk to the sales manager at least every other day throughout the 2-week classroom period to let her know how somebody is tracking, and then she's taking notes for the 90-day review when she sits with them for that. Also, you're going to ask for a training evaluation. You can do that for both the trainer and the employee to get an evaluation of that process. And then we're going to utilize typically peer mentors in a couple of the positions here. So that's where behavior will also come into play, is we want to match up employees to peer mentors who they're going to work well with. So if I'm taking a very fast-paced, big picture employee and matching them up with somebody very detailed and methodical, it's like a perfect storm of conflict. So it's better if we can match people up with similar communication styles. And then, of course, even though we are turning over an employee to a mentor, we want to make sure that we aren't abnegating our responsibilities. So we had a little rhyme there: delegate but don't abnegate. And then, of course, ask for consistent feedback again from the peer mentors so you have information for that 90-day evaluation. And Kim, I think you had a story for us, or
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're asking for that feedback, so for me, it's also understanding that sometimes your peers may be uncomfortable with coming to you and saying, I don't think that Wendy's going to work out, or I have problems with it. So what you may want to do is create an online survey, which is one of the services that Omnia helps our clients with, is to give them that ability to give feedback online, and it's not something that's just within that 90 days. So as they work together on projects, it's a very 360 like online survey where they're giving you that insight to say Kim was great, except she was always 2 days late on everything. And what's the problem. And so we all had to scramble to come up with that. So having those online surveys where you can get that information, but then also, at the end of the day, you can also get that online from the training evaluation. So if you're working and you have remote employees that maybe they're working in a different location than where you are, but they're still being trained, you're still getting those peer mentors, you're able to get that real-time information either through emails or with getting surveys and information like that. So you also want to give them an option to give anonymous feedback where it's something that, as long as it's very factual and to the point, that fellow employees can say, here's what I'm challenged with. It's a brand new supervisor. We can hear from their direct reports where they may not feel comfortable going to you because it's going over their supervisor's head. And when we do the 90-day evaluations, we really have to look at some do's and don'ts on what to do and how to do it. So, Wendy, give us our first do.
Okay, so definitely set aside the time to write the appraisal. I think a lot of people um, sort of don't give this enough credit because what happens is you've got to keep notes throughout the process. You're collecting feedback throughout the process. So you've got a lot of information, hopefully, to put into that evaluation. So you want to set aside the time to do that. If you can gather all of your information up, then you can, set aside the time, write it in there, and you've got the information at your fingertips. But if you wait, and of course I'm going into a don't that I'm going to switch over to Kim, but making sure that if you set aside time, you've got those details that all of the trainers, the mentors, and everybody else has given you, and you could put it in there.
Yeah, and tying right in along that, Wendy, thank you for stopping yourself. I'm like, oh no, you can't rush at the last minute because bad things happen when we rush at the last minute. So a lot of times, and I've already talked about this, we just don't remember what's good. So we are bad. So we just talk about the past 2 to 4 weeks, where if someone started off rocky, you're not going to remember that. Or if they started off great, but now the last 3 days are rocky, we're not going to remember that because we're rushing. We're just trying to get it in because I've got to meet with them in 5 minutes. And then we begin to talk in generality. So we use words like, you always do this, you never do that. This is a consistent problem, when it may not be if we had just taken the time to really truly look at the information that we have and the dates that it came into play. It may have been an issue in the past, but it's been addressed and they're moving forward with it. And so it's very critical that not only you take that time to set aside time to write it, but that you don't rush, you don't talk in generalities. We've already told you, give examples and facts. And then you also have to look about when you're going to conduct the evaluation, right, Wendy?
Absolutely. So calendaring the time to conduct the evaluation is a do. I know because we're a small organization, I've been guilty of this where I've gone, I mean, it's just a few people. So I might go over and say, hey, are you available next Thursday at 3 to do your evaluation? And I don't follow it up with the calendar invite. Now I'm doing that now, but I have been guilty of that in the past. But calendaring the time and sending them an invite really shows them that it's an important process to you, that it has structure, that it's official, and it really shows the employee that you value their time and that you take their development seriously. So especially since they're new and this is the 90-day evaluation period, you want to make sure that you're following those things. And of course, it's just always important to calendar because like we said, we forget stuff. So there's that.
Absolutely. And then once you've calendar it, make sure that you're not late or cancel at the last minute because, unless it's a critical emergency, when we're late or we cancel at the last minute as a supervisor, here's what your employees could be hearing. It's not important. Oh, I've been stressed about this all day, and they're just like, oops, sorry. I showed up 10 minutes later. Oops, sorry. You know what? I overbooked myself. Let's just reschedule it. We've got to take into account those employees' feelings. So, for instance, I have an employee that I ask, what's one thing that I can do to better manage you? And her response, because she thinks worst case scenario and very analytical and perfectionist, said, please don't ever ask me to come to your office and not tell me why. And please don't ever schedule my review either at the end of the day on Friday or over the weekend, on Monday. So I have the whole weekend to think about it, because she goes, on Friday afternoons is when people typically get fired. And I kind of thought about it and chuckled to myself, but it's true. My husband worked for a company that was going through some, it was when the economy was declining, and for a period of about 4 to 6 weeks, someone was laid off every Friday between 3 and 5, to the point that the employees started calling it Black Friday, and not because it was the Friday after Thanksgiving and they were going to get great deals. They were scared to death about, I've got to meet with my supervisor, on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. And what if I walk in and HR is there? So you want to create an environment that's a little stress-free. So make sure that you're, one, telling your employees not only that they're important by calendaring it and showing that they're important by being on time and not canceling, but look at the time frame that you're scheduling it, and not necessarily schedule that 90 days, which is typically the probationary period, on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. By avoiding those things, they're going to be able to walk into the meeting a lot less defensive and a little bit more stress-free.
Absolutely. Sounds like 3 to 5 was unhappy hour over there. Um, Gosh. Yeah, so some of the other do's that we have too is set the environment. So you want to make sure that your desk is clean, it's clutter free, so they don't walk in thinking that you have more important things to do. Have 2 copies of the evaluation, one for them, one for you, a copy of the self-evaluation also for you and for them. And put your phone on D&D. Obviously, don't take calls while you're doing the meeting. Lock your computer so that it doesn't do the email ding, especially if you're tempted to look at your email. But you might also want to take the review to a different location. Oftentimes I use our conference room just because it's got great windows and it's just a comfortable, relaxed setting. But if I'm doing it in my office, I have 2 chairs on the other side of my desk. So we both are sitting on the same side of the desk facing each other and having a conversation. So it's not me sitting on the other side and making it just an uncomfortable way to go. Plus the computer's in the way if everybody's desk is pretty much set up with the computer in front of you. So you want to make sure that you're setting it up to be a conversation that's two-way, that's open, and that's comfortable. So it's not some sort of scary meeting that you're going to have.
Absolutely. And then don't use the cookie cutter effect, even if you have the same goal for everyone on your team. So for instance, everyone needs to generate $3,000 in revenue before earning a commission on your sales team. You can't copy and paste from one person's evaluation to another one, especially during the 90-day evaluation. Everyone has their own strengths and challenges, and make sure that you're specific and targeting those areas of opportunity for the individual that you are evaluating. So don't go, oh, Kim's kind of like Wendy, so I'm just going to change the names to protect Wendy. No, you've got to put the time in to write that evaluation for that person. So now is your time to listen up, way up. Wendy and I are going to give you a little bit of a role play, and what we want you to listen to is, during this particular role play, is everything that the manager is doing wrong. So we've given you some tips, tricks, and tools on writing that painless evaluation. Now we want you to really listen and hear what we are saying and what you hear that the manager is doing wrong, that maybe they're not following what we should tell them to do. Are you ready, Wendy?
I'm ready.
All right. So I will be playing the role of the manager. Wendy is my new employee who is with us for 90 days. So at the countdown, 3, 2, 1, action. Hey, Wendy, your 90 days is up tomorrow. Here's your self appraisal. Can you have it to me by the end of the day? Thanks.
Okay. What do you need on it? What time tomorrow are we meeting? Do you have an electronic copy so I can complete it on the computer?
Why do you have so many questions? Listen, it should be painless tomorrow. Well, I'll know for sure when I complete it. Just kidding, maybe. I don't know. We'll meet whenever we have time. And why can't you just fill this out? Listen, I know I've got an electronic copy on the computer, but I'd have to find it, and I really just don't want to look for it.
Okay, sure. Just let me know. I'm taking the afternoon off for PTO tomorrow. Do you remember that?
Oh, well, if we don't get to it tomorrow, we'll look at it on Monday. No big deal.
Kim, are you ready for my review?
Sure, come on in. Let me just pull out your evaluation form. Yep, here it is. Got it right here. Do you, nope. That's not your evaluation form. That's my evaluation. You got your self-appraisal?
Yeah, I scanned it and emailed it to you yesterday.
Oh, let me look for it. Oh, hold on. Let me answer this email real quick. Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, where were we?
Just my future, Kim.
What was that?
Nothing. Ready when you are.
Okay, and cut. So let's look at some of your answers. So love this. They were taking attention away from the employee during the eval. We will have a copy of this recording. Thank you. It will be available as a download. I love that. Not considering the employee's fears. They showed little value. Absolutely. I just kind of shut Wendy down when she had questions, right?
Yes.
The computer should have been locked. I was unorganized, couldn't find anything, was very distracted and not prepared for the meeting. Answered my email and rushed it through. So, Wendy, as the employee, what was your perspective about this?
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying. Terrifying.
Terrifying. Don't make me do this.
It was just my future.
Just my future. No big deal.
My livelihood.
Let's flip the script a little bit, and we're going to have you listen to another one. And what we want you to type in is what, if anything, is the manager doing well in this evaluation. So once again, I will be playing the role of the manager. Wendy will be playing the role of the employee, and we will count down 3, 2, 1, and action. Hey, Wendy, just checking in with you. I sent you that email with your self-appraisal and directions on how to complete it and when it's due, but wanted to follow up. Do you have any questions about it?
No, well, yes, I know my probationary period is up soon, but how does this evaluation affect my job? Am I officially out of training now? What's next?
Great questions. Well, one, your 90 days is almost completed. And remember, this evaluation is just a checkpoint on the past 90 days. And we're going to have some discussion for the rest of the year. You know, we've talked a lot over the past 90 days, so I can promise you that there's not going to be anything that surprises you on this evaluation. What we're going to talk about is those next steps on where we're going. So please make sure that you add any training questions or areas of opportunity that you feel you may need additional training on the self-appraisal, and take time to brag on yourself and what's going on really well. When we talk also tomorrow, we'll answer that, am I officially out of training? And remember, it's not a probationary period, it's a checkpoint, so there's no need to stress for it.
Okay, knock, knock. Hey, Kim, are you ready for me?
Absolutely. Come on in. I printed a copy of your self-appraisal and evaluation for each of us so that we can discuss it together. So here's your copies. And as we discuss each point, if you have any questions or comments, please stop me and let's discuss it, because I really want this to be a two-way conversation.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So we've talked about these other bullet points, but when we look at the bullet point for attendance, well, you can see I noted that you're always willing to stay late to assist a client when needed, and I really appreciate that willingness to always help out. However, an area of opportunity is punctuality. When I reviewed this, I looked over the 90-day evaluation, and you've been late 10 days.
10 days. Sure.
Yes, yes, I'm positive 10 days, and I know that we've discussed each of these tardies when they occurred, but 10 days is excessive, so I really need you to be here on time. Remember, our clients start calling in at 8:30, and your responsibilities include being available for those calls.
Okay, I get that, but there are 3 other people here, so what does it matter if I'm late every once in a while? Traffic is bad sometimes, and I have a long commute, longer than anyone else on the team. And besides, I call each time I'm going to be late, most of the time, and I take a shorter lunch whenever I'm late, so I'm making up the time.
And I appreciate the fact that you take a shorter lunch, but when you were being interviewed, I stressed our hours of operation for this role repeatedly because it's such a client-centric role, and you agreed that it was doable. When I average those 10 tardies to the 13 weeks in a 90-day evaluation, that equals almost one tardy a week.
Really less than a tardy a week, and that's not too shabby.
And cut. So, what are some of the things that you heard us do well with that? Love this. They had specific criticism. Being factual, remove the emotions and making it personal. They manager is clear with expectations. Gave them time to complete the evaluation and assured the employee that there's nothing to fear because there will be no surprises. And that's critical for me. Very specific comments, clear examples of what the employees was doing right or wrong, clear expectations. Is there anything else that you want to ask? Because you guys are doing great. So you can see that there was a marked difference between those two skits. And while, the doing bad was a bit exaggerated, if we're honest with each other, a lot of times that happens, right? We have this conversation back and forth, and we may not give our employees enough time because we're rushing, or we've hidden it under a stack of papers so that if someone comes into the office, they don't see Wendy's review, but to the employee, it looks like I'm unprepared. So we've got to make sure that we're following this on a regular basis. And we handle those negative reactions. So towards the end, Wendy was giving me a little bit of pushback. Oh, less than one a week, that's fine. When we start handling those negative reactions, we need to make sure that we're taking the emotion out of it. So we're going to use open-ended questions and paraphrase things back. You want to avoid the argument and focus on performance and standards. And keep an open mind on that. So one of the things I say, when we keep an open mind on it, for me, I look at conflict as a positive thing, that it's something that we work together to say, okay, how can we go through it? But even when I do that, sometimes when I hear negative reactions, I get a bit defensive. And like my first thought is, well, I wrote this, and so this is the way it's going to stand. Wendy, we're completely different leaders, when it comes to our behavioral traits. What are some of the things that you feel?
I mean, I definitely hate conflict of any kind, so I will tend to dread an evaluation where I have to share some bad news. But I also know that I personally get very defensive. That's just who I am as a person sometimes. So I need to be very self-aware of that so that as I go into an evaluation, I can keep an open mind, because there's a lot of times where I will change something, the way that it's worded, or I didn't think through the whole situation. I need to go back and fix that. So I just try to be very self-aware and in the moment.
Absolutely. So when you're keeping an open mind, what you want to look at it is if an employee is upset about the way something is worded, ask yourself this question. If another manager comes in, would they understand what I'm trying to say? If the answer is no, then you may need to reword it and discuss it again with the employee, and then begin to start the next steps.
Yep. Okay. Next step. Sorry, that's me. So the next steps, we want to create a development plan for the rest of the year. We want to continue to meet regularly, just like we did in the 90-day evaluation period. We're going to meet regularly throughout the year because, again, the annual review should not be the first time you're sitting with them again after their 90 days. Follow through on all of the additional training. And I think this happens a lot where an employee is mastering their skills, but they still need more training in, let's say, presentation. And we've offered that training through maybe an outsource or a seminar, and then we don't follow through. And that's going to tell the employee, of course, that their development isn't important, that the training period was all they were going to get. We really want to avoid that and, of course, continue to develop people throughout the whole year. And then ask for feedback on your own management style. And that's really important. And Kim had told a story earlier about that. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What can I do better when I'm working with you? So that's a great way to build and keep A players.
Absolutely. And if you don't know how to create a development plan, we have this available for you to download where the employees can write their strengths and 3 challenges, what they need help with, the resources for them. Now, they can't say, I need better pay, better hours, and better technology. Those are challenges outside their control. And when you're working with them to create goals, make sure that they're listing those SMART goals. So you want someone that the goal is very specific, that they're measurable, that it's attainable, that it's relevant, and it's time bound. If you have someone who is super, super quick, you want to make sure that they are setting goals for themselves that isn't something that's going to push them forward. And then use your tools. So as Omnia, as a behavioral assessment company and consulting company, we offer tools such as leadership style so that you understand your leadership report, your style, development reports, as well as performance evaluation. So that's all something that you can reach out to Wendy or I if you have any questions. And I know that we are coming short on time. It's 1:30. Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead, type in any questions or comments that you have for us. As you're typing in, and I see that we have some people typing, we do have our coaching companion, the performance review form, the action plan that's available for you. Also, if you would like a copy of the presentation, you can definitely reach out for us. And then also, our contact information is in there. So I don't want to rush through it, but if you have questions, you can reach out to us or give us a call. Also, in the helpful links, if you liked or hated this webinar, we've talked about feedback, let us know. Simply click on that link and then let us know what we can do, and then we will take that feedback in for our next webinar on the 17th. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.